Well, we had a previous episode where we were talking about doing product management with AI with Chris over here at Tanzu, and now we have two design UX people to talk about how they've been using AI. Chris talked about it a little bit, but why don't we get y'all to introduce yourself first, and then we'll get right into I don't know. We'll see if what Chris was saying was accurate in UX land. That's what I want to know.
Hi, thank you for having me first. It's me, Soomee. I have a privilege to spend my entire career education in design. I work across the diverse industries like publishing, entertainment, education, agency, fintech, to pure tech across two continents and the both coast of the US. As a designer, professor, strategist, and UX lead. Been through done that. I have a front row seat to see every major tech shift over the last few decades. I was there for the first day of a Mac, and then transitioning from handcraft to code, and I saw web evolution, redefine how we collaborate. But honestly, none of those shifts compares to one we are living through right now. Generative AI is causing the biggest shift yet. Leading the transformation here at Tanzu is easily the most exciting chapter yet. Here I am.
Yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to hear your reaction to a lot of this stuff, given the different other everything changes moments you've been through. And how about yourself, Andreas?
Yeah, hello. I'm Andreas. I'm a UX designer on Soomee's team, and I think I was fortunate to start my career at Pivotal Labs, which was a very, very agile, focused organization and kind of way of working. And I think that how that relates to what we're doing now is I think Pivotal had a really strong focus on process and how the team works together and how designers work with software engineers and PMs, that kind of cross-functional experience. And now we're in a different setting in the at Broadcom in Tanzu. And I think once I saw our team's focus and kind of experimenting now with how do we adopt generative AI into our workflow and how we build products, I think it just really spiked my interest in kind of, I saw it as a great opportunity of like, oh, we're going to start experimenting with our process again. So I think what I'm bringing to it is that like kind of real strong interest in I have a whole bunch of different models of ways of working that I like to explore with and try out. So this was just like here's a new tool and a new way, and let's see what that means for how we all work together.
Well, I think that's a good start for this first kind of impossibly broad question, but maybe y'all can thread it to not be a exegesis on all of humanity when I ask it here. But like, how has like working with AI in what y'all do, kind of at a high level, but also like day to day changed?
I mean, overall, things changes. We are managing agentic workflow. So if you're asking like how things changes, I can see like 4 big area. And for research, we move from weeks of a manual interview synthesis to real-time sentiment analysis. That's a big change. And prototyping, we're swapping static mocks for prompt-driven and model-aware prototype. And third, governance. Instead of manually auditing design system, now we use AI design system governors to enforce design token automatically. Finally, the testing. Instead of relying solely on time-consuming model rate tests, we run predictive usability optimizer, we call it validator, and simulate multiple user paths. Those are like huge changes. So if you're thinking about this agentic workflow, our roles responsibility completely shift. Now, instead of producing artifact, we have to be the behavior engineer. So designers are now, instead of a focus on artifact, they're focused on how to build the logic, what guardrail we have to set so the AI agents can interact with people, users. Because UI and UI designers no longer the only party who can generate the artifact. anyone can generate artifact. We have to enable others to do so. On top of that, now, because we're shying away this artifact, we also have to ourselves to be self-elaborate the strategic literacy to become business-aligned decision maker. I encourage designers to spend 80% of their time on user intent and then 20% of execution. This is what we do at the high level now, and that's our focus and how things shift.
Well, one of the things people say about using AI, I guess in personal life too, but in a work context, is people get used to being like more of a manager than a doer. And I don't know, some of what you're saying sounds like instead of spending a lot of time creating the work, so to speak, you're more trying to orchestrate it and manage it and describe it for the AI doing that. I mean, does that apply in your experience here or not?
Soomee touched on the first thing of, traditionally a designer will be asked to produce a, Figma wireframe pretty in high fidelity, as that's kind of the thing that you hand off to engineering, like the final kind of output of your work is there lots of collaboration works with PMs and engineers, but ultimately the output of that is the final mockups in Figma that you give to the engineering team. And so that that basic process is definitely exploded and not not how we're working now. So now it's more about, we have Chris talked about the BMAD pipeline, that being the kind of framework that we're all working within, this kind of agentic workflow that goes from start to finish. And there's kind of requirements, and then there's UX, and then there's engineering, and there's agents along the way. So as a designer, my job is to make sure that my UX agent can kind of consume requirements well and deliver something to the engineering agents. And so in the past it was very high fidelity, but now it's like, what's the lowest fidelity, simplest thing that we can kind of produce quickly. So and the idea being that we just get something through the pipeline, ideally text-based, potentially like a description of what we want the UX to be, and then the agents themselves can build that and produce it, and then something comes out of the pipeline, and then we review it as a team and go, we wanted it to be this component and it didn't build that right, and it used the wrong component. Like, we have to figure out what part of our design system isn't configured correctly, or what part of our guidelines aren't configured correctly, that it's building that wrong, and then we send it back through the pipeline. So it's this, definitely a mindset shift from I'm handing off a perfect Figma spec to, I want to as quickly as possible get the agent to hand off what the UX agent to hand off what the engineer, like the developer agent, needs, just enough documentation or kind of to capture that intent and get it through the pipeline. So it's much faster as well.
Yeah. So I'm curious about I mean, two of the words you used there, like perfection and high fidelity, right? Like there's a very, like, when you create like like you're saying, the wireframes and things like that, like there's a certain, you like them to be good, nearing perfect. And from what it sounds like, that's not necessarily what it's always like in this process. What does that mean, like, as far as you're changing things to get faster cycles?
Yes, definitely. We have to make things changes. So for the pipeline work, for the AI agents work, we have to spend a lot of time to build engines. Like I said, our roles, I think we like to call it behavior engineer, no longer UX designer. So the engines like design system engine, research engine, validation engine, usability scoring engine. We spend a lot of time to build those engines. So let's say you create a Mock-up files to understand, AI agents understand how the components looks like, act like. And the skill files, like how we evaluate the usability, how we evaluate the VPAT, and how the templates, page templates is supposed to be comprised. Of course, we have to build kind of persona, synthesize the persona, right? So those things, it's not just creating artifact for the requirement. We have to build the engine behind the scene that agents can act like, talk like, work like. That's what we're doing.
Something that y'all are returning back to a lot, and I hear is there's a lot of agent education that goes on, like telling, as you were saying, your behaviors, and like, you know, Chris was calling product management intentions. Like, you're always trying to communicate, like, this is what I want, or you know, this is the boundary of what we're doing. This is our deal, so to speak. And you know, so then Andreas, like, with that, I mean, I can see how you wouldn't have time during all these cycles for like the perfect UI, and you would want to like have like just kind of faster wireframes in there. But like, what does that end up looking like in a cycle?
Yeah. So we started with, like I mentioned before, the BMAD pipeline. So we had adopted that and then have been iterating on it, adjusting it as our kind of just starting place. So the part of the BMAD pipeline, it has a UX agent out of the box with some functionality there. So our model and usage of BMAD has been to have a human in the loop reviewer. So if a feature is going into our agentic pipeline, starts with the PMs, they set the intent, and then that intent goes to the kind of UX step, for lack of a better word, kind of in this pipeline. And I saw it as a relationship between me and the agent, and I'm basically helping the agent reviewing kind of its output as it processes these requirements. So that'll be, but it's like a very interactive experience. It's basically like, okay, we've got a new requirement coming in. It's usually like not at the component level like you were mentioning, but it's like a workflow, a feature, a fully kind of end-to-end of some sort of slice of functionality. And basically the agent kind of follows like a traditional design process. It's like, okay, let's look at competitors. How are competitors solving this problem? And then it goes and finds competitors and describes those kind of competitor direction or like ways and options that competitors are solving a similar problem for their customers. But it does ultimately leave it up to, me, the designer, to say, hey, of these 5 competitor directions that I just found for you, like, Datadog solves it in this way with this kind of interaction. But it ultimately is asking me to confirm, like, of these 5, are any of them interesting? Any of them that you want to adopt? Any of them that we should like bring into our user experience for the solution? So there is that, like, that's where the human in the loop comes in, is it's doing the work to go find all the competitors, but then it's asking me to kind of say yes or no, pick a direction. And then same with, once we actually get to coming up with some ideas or directions for how that, user experience is going to go, it's basically coming up with 3 or 4 directions of like, here's how we could solve this problem, considering our design patterns, considering competitors, how they're approaching this. Then it says, like, here's a few directions that we could go in. And then again, it's human in the loop, me basically saying, like, yes, let's take this direction.
It sounds like when I do AI stuff, it's very similar, where I'm just like, show me something. And then I wait a few minutes. Correct. And I'm like, nope, that's not it. Or like, I love this part, but I don't like that part. Now show me again. And you're just like, it's almost, you're making a whole bunch of, like, I would call macro and micro decisions, like, in the course of an hour.
It's kind of have to balance this. So like I said, like one of the misconceptions that the UX designers kind of try to perfect the finer marks with the pixel perfect, but yeah, that is kind of less than 20% of what we do, and then we evaluate our final output. So we look at the outputs, the quality of artifact, of course, and then is that an optimal flow for intended persona? And then finally, is it aligned with the business goal, right? So if you think about all these different three pillars, and sometimes it looks great, but it's not for our intended persona.
Right.
It's not better than our competitors. And then also sometimes it's misalignment with the goal. So because of before at the end, we don't know what we don't know, what AI actually generated. So a lot of the things we have to consider to make the satisfaction rate.
But it seems like a lot of the work is it's hard to put, but making sure it does the right thing, right? Like saying
Correct.
like you interpreted like what the users are doing and the behavior, and so a lot of your work ends up being. It seems like you do a lot more of that evaluation work than necessarily visual things.
Correct, because of the persona is very complicated, kind of a overrated name, but if you're thinking about the one persona, it has a lot of a different perspective and aspect to it. So let's pick PE, platform engineer. Platform engineer can be novice and expert. They've been used our product or not, first time users or regular. Is this person disabled or not? Is this person wearing one hat versus multiple hats? Is this person living in Asia versus America? So there's a lot of a permutation that has to bake to the one persona. So what we have built, the way we build, haven't really baked this kind of a various different aspect of the real users. So now AI, we hope, can help us with the various different user flow, with the various different paths. So even we have a path, those part is still working in progress. We have to build, like I said, going back to, we have to build the engine to simulate in reality.
Your example of building a persona is interesting because it's making me think that one of the more important things that the humans do, that you all do, is let's call it two things. One, making judgments about decisions that are done, right? Like, was this way of thinking about the persona the right way, and is this way the way that we're implementing this workflow the right way? But then the other side of that is like making compromises, like deciding on the compromises that you make. Like you were laying out all these different personas, right? And eventually you have to decide like, well, we can't satisfy 30 different personas, so we're going to pick 5 or whatever it is. But I would imagine humans doing those two things, like judging and narrowing, let's call compromising. I don't know, it feels like humans would be better at that.
I mean, to be UX designer, we wire so many things, right? There's UX principle, law, visual design principle, and we have a lot of things wires. Think about this way. So there is, set aside the designers. So let's say Halloween. The theme is rock and roll. 70s rock and roll. So
sounds
we
good so far.
We kind of understand, okay, so I'm gonna do my hair, makeup, wear some clothes this way, that way, I'm gonna wear bag and boots, etc., right? So the human brains wires so many things together to match 70s rock and roll, right? You think about the music and TV show, movie, entertainment, and I don't know, like sports, all that together, and then you narrow down instantly one output. This is how designers do. We wire so many dots, millions dots together, create a multiple design options. Now, we have AI agents actually work like this. But the challenge is AI only has very limited constraint context. If not, they cannot generate good output we intended. So our job is, okay, this is a massive amount of data. How we're going to narrow down to match what we intended. That's our challenges.
I think that brings up, like, so in this experience doing this, and it's been like 6 months now, maybe since you started thinking about doing it, or like, so it's a fair amount of time. What hasn't worked so well?
Yeah, things works. Like I said, AI definitely helped us to synthesize the big data. Like I said, we have a massive amount of data out there. Those data should drive the design solution. So data is like a customer interview, market trend, business literacy, persona, job to be done, etc., etc. It's stored in various repository by various different parties. Synthesizing data is really time consuming. It takes weeks of the weeks, and then synthesize too. But now it's just less than an hour, or a couple of minutes. So it definitely helped us to use the data. It definitely helped us to produce data-driven solution and then align the users and the business goal. So how we are doing that? First of all, we actually create a called feedback librarian. It's like we have not decided the name, but we call it feedback librarian. So anyone in Tanzu, they can query out to produce the result. Hey, what was the biggest challenge our current client has last 6 months, right? We can generate like a blink of eyes. We can give our design requirement, the solution requirement, and they say, hey, this is I've tried to solutionize. Is that matched our client's need? We can do such a things. Those like synthesized data definitely help. Two is we call it fit and finish it. This is another UX's task to validate what UX delivery matched what UI engineer implemented. It was time consuming and also hardly got high priority. Why? It's not because we don't want to fix it or ignore it. It's about the priority in the given time. So end up, we have to bear some inconsistency, a lot. But now AI allowed the UX designers correct the mistake in the code directly. We no longer take the screenshot, explain pixels, colors, spacing, font sizing, etc. Now, on top of that, it actually reduces so many steps of a process. What I mean by that, so for this fixing process, it's like creating bulk ticket, explain what to fix it, communicate between the parties, and then resource assignment, triage, priority assessments, on and on and on. Designer, go to the environment, look at what to fix it, they change it, that's it. So time saving and the increased accuracy of the consistency. This is two huge parts. I see AI definitely helping right now.
What's something that you thought would work really well that just like you don't do anymore because it doesn't work at all?
So I think when kind of going into this whole experiment and when we were first playing around with the AI tools, as Soomee was just calling out the fit and finish piece, like a designer can now go into the front end repo for like where all our code lives, and we can do that fit and finish work. We can adjust and be like, oh, this padding is wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And the designer can then, now we're empowered to do a pull request on doing a bunch of fit and finish changes in the code base. So when we went into actually designing features, not just like the polish at the end, but we're going into the design process, I think a lot of us had the assumption that we could do that same level of like we could just go into the front end code base and come up and then build out features, ideas, and prototypes. And then we quickly learned that it uses an insane amount of tokens and a lot more time to be, modifying the actual front end, like the actual code base. So when we first started in the pod, we were trying that. We're like, okay, this is too much time. This is too much tokens. We had to like scale back and figure out a different way to quickly prototype. So the thing we ended up landing on was HTML prototypes that kind of tell you where the components should live on the page, but it doesn't look like our app. It doesn't look like Tanzu Hub. It looks like an approximation of Tanzu Hub in HTML, but you can like really quickly and really cheaply with tokens come up with like 5 different directions for user flows, and not use a lot of tokens, and then pick a direction. And then the real interesting part has been figuring out like now instead of our handoff being a Figma spec with lots of, you know, the exact specs of the components and the spacing, the details, we're actually handing off via the UX agent. We're handing off an HTML file as an approximation. It like has the stuff in the right place, and that's apparently very helpful for the dev agents to pick up. And alongside, we do an HTML kind of spec, and then alongside that, we have a design MD file for that feature, the markdown file, and it's basically kind of defining the behaviors. And it has a little table that says like, here's the components we're using. The header is this, you know, the header from our design system. The footer is this. The cards we're using are these cards. So between the two of those, the like approximation HTML and then a markdown file describing it, that's what we hand off to the engineers. And both of those artifacts are very fast to produce for AI versus the actual. But I just thought we would be, you know, doing it in the front end, and we would be doing it in high fidelity in code, and that would be awesome, but it just like wasn't feasible.
I mean, it sounds like your wireframes are now HTML files. Like it's along with what you're saying, the markdown commentary that like not only I think from what you're saying, not only says like here's the header that we use and things like that, but there's a description of like the behavior and what's going on here, exactly. Right? To kind of help communicate that. Yep. You know that brings up. Maybe y'all can help me think through this, but like, you know, when you do coding with AI and other activities, like one of the things people talk about a lot now is you got to give it like a goal, like explain like what you're doing and what you want to achieve, and kind of like a goal with it. But I wonder, when you look to the other parts of like UX and design, like does it work to give it a goal, or is it not good at figuring out like I'm going to give you an absurd goal, but you know, the PE would like to diagnose why this container is failing. like can you give it like that kind of use case and it's actually successful at coming up with the UX around it, or does it just totally not work for that kind of goal? That
gets into the we haven't asked it to do that, like the kind of, and I guess we could try, but the UX agent that we have been building is a lot more like design process oriented. It's I think because of that context window, if you just ask it to solve a problem, it's too broad and the context is too big and there's too many things to consider. So the agents actually has a design process that is just like a structured way to kind of go through some steps to get to a good solution, which is like step 1, what are the pain points here? Yeah. Step 2, how are competitors doing that? Step 3, what are the elements of our design system that we can be using to solve this problem? Step 4. So it's like each of those is a discrete step and a decision made, and that's like a little context window. And then like the decision's made, and then it moves to the next decision, and it has that smaller context window. So I've definitely got that question from like stakeholders on our team of, I think they just perceived it as like, you know, the PM writes a requirement and you just plug that into the UX agent and it comes up with magic. Like
right.
The design solution. And I was like, and we're like, no, actually there's still rigor here to get to a good solution. We need to be using our design system. We need to understand industry best practices for this problem space. So yeah, there's definitely more like nuance and steps to it. It's not just like throwing a problem at it. You could, yeah. In that example, if you know, here's our customer problem, I would like to keep that at the you know, idea solution fidelity of like, hey, our customer has this problem. How could we approach this? And then you could consider 5 different like Post-it note level solutions for how to solve that problem. But that's not a fully fleshed wireframe solution. Sure. That's just their starting point, right?
You know, I think maybe something related to that is like, I like barely, you've mentioned this, you two have mentioned this several times, like I barely know what a design system is, but what little I know of it, maybe you can define it a little bit at first, but it seems like It seems like there could be a lot going on there.
Okay, so design system. Think of the design system as digital Lego set, accompanied by instruction manual. It is a single source of truth, contains our design token, reusable UI component, and code snippet that allow the designers and developers to build the software faster with a total visual operational consistency. That's the design definition of the design system. Now, AI fundamentally shifts the design system from static library for human into living intelligent engine for both the human and AI agent. Historically, design system was instruction manual, like a depository of a Figma component and code the team has manually pull from and maintain. But today, AI changes. How? Firstly, design systems are now just context layer for AI. So then when AI agent generates screen or write front-end code, you need the guardrails. Our design system token, schema, give the AI model the rules and accessibility standard and brand logic. You need to output production ready UI without the visual drift. And the AI also let the governance is get to be automated. Instead of UX team play UI police, AI act as automated governor. It scan the file in real time and catch and fix non-compliant component automatically. It's still work in progress, but eventually AI have to catch it all. And finally, assembly. We move away from manual drag drop UI building. Now assembly is prompt driven. Designers can describe the flow, and then AI use our design system, zigzag component like the Lego bricks, to assemble the layout instantly. So ultimately, AI turned design system from something we constantly have to manually manage into some engine that power fast compliance and scalable product design. This is a design system. How AI changed design system. This is a short description.
Do you think you end up spending more time on design system stuff now with AI or less, or it's neutral? Like, it seems like it becomes even more of a focal point, but also importantly, explaining and maybe even adapting it like becomes something you do a lot. Like it's sort of a tool to interact with the AI.
So the design system, the basic design system you use the Clarity. Right? Clarity is open source. Because it is open source, it has a very loose end. What does it mean? It gives a lot of freedom to formulate it, like a Lego, right? So if you have a Lego bricks, some can create Jew, some create the garden, right? So the Clarity let people to create their own theme. So, which means we have to confine the brand logic into this Clarity design system. So we designers have to explain how to use this Clarity system. On top of that, we also have to build our custom component in case it's not up. Even when we assemble the bricks, sometimes the brick itself need to be a little bit of a customization time to time.
How about yourself, Andreas? Like, what's been your experience with like how? Let's say the role and your interaction with the design system you use like needs to change or has changed now that you do.
Oh yeah, it's definitely more front and center. I think in the past on teams, you might have like one person that's maybe more, or if you're on a really big team, you'll have a whole dedicated person or people to building and maintaining the design system. I think this has democratized it a little bit. Like everybody can work on the design system, I think, more easily now, prompt driven. And like our design system used to, on a design team just live in Figma, and then maybe the UI team, front end engineers, would be maintaining, some aspect of their components, reflecting our design system. And now those lines are blurred a lot. Like I can create a reusable component in the front end, via vibe coding, and do a pull request and get that reviewed by the front end engineer. So a lot more overlap for sure. And I think I've noticed this kind of with industry peers as well, is just this has been this huge forcing mechanism for everybody to like really document what their design system is, written down really well. Like Soomee is saying, Clarity is this open source system and it has documentation, but we have, our own custom stuff built on top of that. So getting really rigorous about, capturing that, documenting it, has been really satisfying to be forced to do that. I think sometimes documentation gets, deprioritized versus when you just need to do feature work. So yeah, we have a whole library of our custom components. We have an MD file that we've created, or we have a folder in our repository for Tanzu Hub. That's, the design guidance folder. And within that, we have subfolders of like, here's all our components, and here's an MD file for each component, just defining like how to use it, when to use it, for the AI to like read and consume and understand. So we have that for components. We have that for our patterns. We have that for our page templates. And then we've also built out a kind of, we call it our showcase, but it's just like an equivalent to like a storybook, hosted site where we have demos of all of our custom components. And so there we've listed we have the component, a little demo of how it works in code. And then beside it, we have the MD file that describes how and when to use it. And that whole package together becomes very powerful for both the AI and also, for the design team to have that, to have it documented.
One of the things y'all have brought up over and over again is, maybe to put it in my own words, is there is all this undocumented stuff going on, like the behaviors and how people, those 50 different personas you were talking about earlier, Soomee. I'll just put a number on it. Like a lot of that is no one either needed to write it down, or was given the time to write it down, or usually third, didn't really realize it could be written down. and in the case of like working with an AI or even a new human, it's kind of like they can't suck all that knowledge out of your brain. So you have to figure out some way of extracting it, which seems like the case. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the organization, team structure. I think traditionally what we would call the culture side, right? Like how the organization runs and what team structures look like. And so, when I talk with Chris about this, with using AI at Tanzu for product management, it seemed like there was quite a bit of like team structure change and how various teams work together. And there's been a little bit of a preview of what you said about that. But so how is like what the team is composed of and how it works with other teams changed to take advantage of AI things, or because you had to change?
I don't think that the team structure itself will require changes. It's because of AI. I don't think so. But the roles and tasks definitely changes. So like I mentioned before, we used to focus on craftsmanship, but now we have to focus on curation and logic and the build engines, etc. So we have to be system thinker and curator of AI output, because of this output can be generated by various different people, not just the UX team. Same as anybody can use our data, which is feedback librarian, and synthesize the data. So UX designer has to be the enabler. Of course, we are the main users, but we also have to be enabler. So I can see not the structure of the team, it's more like a roles and responsibility changes.
How about yourself, Andreas?
I think there's been one very intentional structural change I noticed was just having a pod. Like they gave a team the name pods, and then in that inherently was a little more focus and dedication to that specific domain. So one thing that's different for me is I'm focused on one part of the product versus many parts of the product for this. So it's like I have one PM that I work with and the engineers are dedicated to this area. Whereas before I might be working on 2 or 3 product areas with a few different PMs. So I think that was part of a limitation of the experiment where we wanted like just a subset of our teams working in this new way on the pods. We wanted to narrow it, but I think that also has lots of benefits of that focus and holding context. We would also, it allowed us to do daily stand-ups with the PM and the engineers, and we're also working much more quickly because of AI. So that was a big kind of team structure thing. I mean, it wasn't dramatic, but it did impact the day-to-day a lot.
And like you said, you have a pivotal Tanzu Labs background. Like, how does that match to like the balanced team concept, or like going back even further, like the extreme programming team concept, which are kind of the same thing?
Some similarities. I think the best part of the balanced team was the focus on one area and the frequent communication. So we know what features we're all working on, and we can keep that kind of in our head a little bit better, and check in daily on like, what are we working on, what aspect of that, versus when you're working in different teams in different contexts and context switching everything down a lot, and the frequency slows down, and then it's like, oh, can you get this to me? And then they don't get it for a couple of days, versus I can get them something to my team within an hour after stand up. Like, so that aspect of the balanced team, I think, definitely mimics it. But there are other aspects of the way just like the BMAD pipeline is stood up. It feels very waterfall currently, of like a feature goes from product requirements to UX to engineering via agents through the pipeline. And that is kind of anti-balanced team to have those kind of handoffs. So there's some good, some bad in my opinion.
Like, I could imagine things could go either way with what you're talking about. On the one hand, you might want to say, we've got this new AI thing, so we can just be more, I mean this in a half joking, half serious way, more agile, right? Like kind of have less process and handoffs and do things like that. But then on the other hand, like based on a lot of what we were just talking about, I could also see where the better answer would be like, we do need structure, right? Like you do need to
the agents need documentation, and they need rules and structure.
Right. And then definitely, as something as big as Tanzu platform and other Tanzu things, like, you need a lot of structure just to figure out if the right thing is being done. But speaking of, like, so what's an experiment that you're some question that's unanswered that you're thinking about, like, let's figure out if this works or not?
So, like I said, we have to evolve to be behavior engineer over and over, right? So far, if you ask me today, AI hasn't replaced UX yet. So it actually elaborates us to be strategists, like a logic architect, guardians of the human trust, right? So, we have to focus user intention, like I said, persona, job to be done, the data-driven designs, on and on and on, right? Finally, trust is the fragile currency in the AI era. We must become ethical stewards. So we have to design for transparency, adding things like a confidence indicator, so the users know when AI is guessing versus when it's certain. And while we're leveraging AI to audit accessibility and inclusivity, right? We still rely on human intuition to catch these nuances, culture BS. The model can overlook still. And another things that we have to think about is that, we're so spoiled this AI. Everybody asking to AI before they deep dive. So we asked AI, hey, what is this information? Summarize me. If so, how our UI our interface can be summarized to AI. So those things we have to think about.
One of the things that I think is valuable about people who make software using AI themselves is they hopefully become they take their user experience and give it to their users, like the whole confidence indication thing, right? Like it's easy to not realize that when you're using AI, you would like it to tell you, are you sure about this? And just kind of routinely like have that surface in the workflows and the UIs that you're doing. But how about yourself, Andreas?
Kind of process wise, at the process level is where I get the most interested. And kind of going back to the balance team stuff and the kind of Pivotal Labs best practices, if there's anything we can glean from that. And I think just the kind of in that world, the PM and the designer were very kind of attached at the hip and really working together to go from like a customer problem space, a pain point, and like evolve that into ideas, and then and then take those ideas into prototypes and validate. And that was just like a parallel track of work. And right now it still feels like we're a little bit siloed of like the feature requirements come and the designer works on them, and that's getting replicated in the agentic pipeline. So I think we can go the value of XP and the value of the balance teams with speed, and I think we can go faster and be more efficient that if we continue to experiment with like the whole product phase of this work. So the BMAD pipeline that we adopted was pretty opinionated, kind of out of the box. So I want us to like now do a big like retro on this release that we've followed the BMAD process and really make it our own, and like tweak and adjust it moving forward.
I think that's a good place to wrap up, because then maybe in 6 months we can talk again about what the retros found and how things have been going, because I think it is like to put it in a silly way, I don't think anyone knows exactly what's going on. and the best way to use this stuff like ongoing. So really what you're left with, as y'all are doing, is experimenting and like seeing what works and then moving to the next experiment and the next thing, which is great, right? Like it is I guess in a kind of like Ouroboros, like snake eating itself kind of thing, like that's also faster when you use AI, like because you automate a lot of things, and now you can focus on interpreting the experimentation stuff. Well, anyways, this has been great. It's interesting to see how all sorts of parts of the software development process change with using AI. And so, is there any if people are interested in other stuff that y'all have individually? Do you have anything on the World Wide Web to point them to?
I don't have a blog. I just have a LinkedIn. I can send you a LinkedIn link. You can take a look. What have I done?
How about yourself, Andreas?
LinkedIn, and then I've got just my website, andreaseiken.com, and it's just a portfolio of my work. But any thoughts and musings is definitely happening on LinkedIn.
Yeah, well, great. Well, I'll put those links below there so people can go check that out. And with that, thanks again. I think it was fun talking with y'all. Yeah. Bye-bye. We'll see everyone next time.